This is the brand new Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, a phone with a name that's so unnecessarily long it took me a week to actually get it right. And coincidentally, that's about the same amount of time that I had this phone. So here's my full review of the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold. I'm getting good at that after a week of owning it. Not only is this phone a pretty big improvement over the previous Google Pixel Fold, but it's also a pretty large jump forward when it comes to foldable phones. There's a couple things that Google did on this phone that make it my favorite large form factor foldable phone of any that's available on the market. Differences between the Pixel 9 Pro Fold and something like the Z Fold 6 include the larger front display, which essentially make using this phone feel like a standard smartphone. Not only that, this phone is also one of the thinnest, if not the thinnest, foldable phone that I've ever used. But of course, being a large foldable, it also has similarities to other large foldable phones. The first of which, and the most unfortunate, is the price point. This phone starts at $1,799 or $1,800 before tax. And while I understand that this is still somewhat new technology, it's been like 6 years that we've been getting these foldable phones. You'd think that they'd drop the price at least a little bit. Not only that, even though this phone is called the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, it doesn't feel as pro as the actual Google Pixel 9 Pro or Pro XL. And we'll get into some reasons why that would be later on in the video, but overall, I've got to say, I'm really enjoying this phone, especially after a week of using it. But let's start off the review by diving into the form factor of the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, one of my favorite things about this phone. Right off the bat, on the front of the phone, you've got this beautiful 6.3-inch Actua display. It's a 1080p OLED with 441 pixels per inch. It's a beautiful display, the color accuracy is great, and it has a variable refresh rate of up to 120 Hertz. Not only that, Google has also bumped up the brightness on the front display of this phone, noticeably so over the previous Google Pixel Fold, and apparently now the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold gets up to 1800 nits of brightness. Now I don't have a tester to test that. I'm working on getting one so that I can test in the future, but based on what I'm seeing, it's brighter than the last one. According to Google, it also has a peak brightness of up to 2700 nits. But for me, the biggest improvement on this phone over the previous Pixel Fold or any of the other foldable phones that I've used is this front display. The fact that it's actually the same aspect ratio as a standard phone or even the Pixel 9 Pro is really great. You don't feel like you're using a light version of your phone. You feel like you're using an actual full-sized phone, which makes responding to text messages, consuming media, and doing anything that you do on your standard candy bar-shaped phone really easy. And I found this to be the case in any of the other large form factor foldable phones that I've used, but I end up using the front screen like 70% of the time and the inside screen like 30% of the time. And while that seems stupid, when you spend $1,800 minimum on a foldable phone, it's nice to be able to use a larger front-facing screen. I guess I really have no rebuttal for that. I probably should be using the inside screen more because I spent so much money on the phone, but it is a lot easier to respond to text messages on the outer screen, not only because it's not a split keyboard, but also because you just pull it out of your pocket and there it is. But getting back to what I was saying, the fact that it's the same shape and the same size as a standard smartphone makes that a much easier and more pleasant experience than something like the Z Fold 6, which feels like this little sliver of a phone. Now, the one small gripe that I had with this phone is that when you look at it straight on, it's asymmetrical, and as a right-hander, it's actually not a problem because you've got these nice rounded edges and it feels great in your palm. But for someone who's left-handed, because this edge is so sharp, well, sharp compared to the right edge, it doesn't feel as good in the hand. Now, I totally understand that putting a hinge on a rounded edge like this would be very difficult and would make the inner experience of the phone nowhere near as good as what it is. But in this instance, I wouldn't have minded them taking a more Z Fold approach, where the phone is symmetrical, you've got sharper edges on both sides, and you don't feel like the right-handers are getting the better experience with the phone and the left-handers are being left out to dry. Additionally, while I don't mind the quirkiness of the design of this phone, I think it's kind of interesting looking, I don't love the dead space that you have with no screen in these corners. If they had just gone for a full squared off display and made the screen go all the way to the edge on both sides, it would have been fine. And honestly, it wouldn't have even been a point that I would have thought to bring up because it wouldn't have been something I thought about. Of course, on both the front display and the back of this phone, you've got Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which is significantly more durable than previous Gorilla Glass Victuses. However, I'm not willing to test that for you. I'm sorry, I spent $2,000 on a phone. I don't want to break it. Speaking of the back, I got the obsidian color of this phone. There are two color options. You've got obsidian, which is essentially black or dark gray, and there's porcelain, which is more of a cream or a white. And this frosted black glass with the shiny Google logo looks amazing on the back of the phone. I absolutely love it. Of course, it's hard to miss the giant camera bump on the back of the phone, which is different than other Google Pixels because rather than being a line across the back of the phone, it is a large rounded rectangle. But the more that I've used this phone, the more I don't mind it. And the fact that I can use this large camera bump as sort of a ridge to rest my finger when I'm holding the phone, I wouldn't have minded it being the standard form factor that runs all the way across the back of the phone. I just feel like that would make it feel more consistent in the Pixel lineup. I'm certain there's a reason why they did it this way. There's no reason to change your design language for no reason. But I just feel like it looks a little bit odd. Does it look as odd as the iPhone 15 Pro Max with this like weird three eyes situation? Yeah, I think it looks as odd as that. Yeah, I think it actually might look odder. But hey, the casing that the cameras are in feel really great. This sort of satin metal I guess it's anodized aluminum. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it feels really, really nice, and it feels very premium. In fact, the entire build quality of this phone is incredible. The finishes, the materials, they all feel durable and sturdy. And speaking of build quality, the new hinge on this phone feels really, really good. It's smooth, it opens all the way up to be completely flat, it doesn't feel flimsy. Like I said, I've used it for a full week and it doesn't feel like it's gotten even remotely looser. Some phones that I've used in the past have felt that way, now usually over a more extended period of time, but still, it feels really, really good. This new hinge, I love it. And there's no branding on the hinge, which is interesting. Usually phone companies do that, but Google decided against it, which I actually kind of like. It keeps it simple, minimal, and really nice looking. But now let's get to the reason you guys are all here, the inner display. So this is an 8-inch Super Actua Flex display, and it looks beautiful. I mean, gorgeous. It's a 2076 by 2152 OLED display with 373 pixels per inch, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's a really, really beautiful display. Like the outer display, Google has upped the brightness of the inner display to 1600 nits, standard usage, and then 2700 nits at peak brightness. And it's bright. It looks great, especially indoors. Outdoors, you know, most phones struggle outdoors, especially in direct sunlight, but this phone does a good job. Now, one of the biggest questions that I get about any foldable phone that I'm testing, whether it's from my friends or just people online, is how is the crease? Because unfortunately, with our current flex screen technology, there is no way to fully get rid of the crease. Some phones have done a great job of making it very hard to see, almost imperceptible when you're looking at it directly face on. Like this phone does a pretty good job with that. It looks like it's not even there when you're looking at it face on. But no matter what foldable you get, you're gonna have a crease there. You're gonna feel it when you rub your finger across it, and you're gonna get weird reflections when the light hits it. And this phone is no different. And I would say that this crease is probably not the best crease that I've ever seen, but it's definitely not the worst. It's fine. It gets the job done. You don't really notice it when you're watching media or content on the inside of the phone because you kind of just look past it. And like I said before, if you're looking at the phone face on, you're not going to notice it, but it is there, and it is something that's noticeable. And one thing that I've noticed after testing a bunch of foldable phones in the last couple months is that the crease does get worse the more that you use the phone. Not a huge amount, but when you first pull this phone out of the box, not really there that much, but then the more that you use it, it kind of bends itself in and it just kind of stays there. So keep that in mind. But, you know, unfortunately, there's no foldable phones currently that don't have a crease. Oh, one thing I should note about this phone when I talk about build quality is that this phone is now IPX8 water resistant, which is great. Better than last year's version, but it's still not as durable as a standard phone. That's just the nature of the beast when it comes to foldable phones. There's a mechanism inside the phone that is more susceptible to breaking than a standard slab phone, which, you know, you could pretty much do anything with and it'll struggle to break. As far as tech specs go, the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and for $1,800 you can get the 256 gigabyte storage option version, or you can upgrade to the 512, which is more expensive. I think it's like $19.19. Let me see the price. Yeah, $19.19. Basically $1,920. What an odd price. This phone is powered by the Google Tensor G4, which is significantly more powerful than in the previous Pixel Fold, however, not as powerful as something like the Z Fold 6 from Samsung. And I will say this phone, while still very fast and while still very capable to handle everything that I needed it for, it just didn't feel as snappy as something like the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, which to be fair is an Ultra phone, but is still $600 cheaper than this. While this thin form factor is amazing and it feels great in the hand, there are some downsides to that. The first is that it's kind of difficult to open this phone. You really got to get your fingers in that little edge right there and pop it open. The second is that the heat dissipation on this phone is not as good as some other phones out there because it doesn't have a lot of space, so it does get hot after heavy usage. And the third is that while this phone is super thin and super light and feels great, when you fold it, it's thicker than a standard phone. And that's, again, just the nature of the beast when it comes to foldable phones, but I really like that Google did go for this super thin feel. Because even though, yes, there are some downsides, overall, I prefer this hand feel-wise and weight-wise to really any of the other foldable phones. In fact, I'm going to say it right now, I think this is my favorite large form factor foldable phone on the market. I would take this over the Z Fold 6, which was my favorite up to this point. This phone just feels better. It just feels more friendly. It feels nicer in the hand. I just like the thinness of it. I like the display. I just like this phone better. But there are still more downsides with this phone. And the main downside that really bums me out the most as someone who films YouTube videos on my phone constantly are the downgraded cameras from the standard Google Pixel 9 Pro. It baffles me that phone brands make their foldable phones, which usually are $600 to $800 more expensive than their standard Pro phones, have worse features. It happened with the Z Fold 6 and it's happening now with the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold. This phone's cameras are worse than the cameras on the $1,100 Pixel 9 Pro. Maybe it's because they're trying to save money, because this phone has an extra camera inside the phone that a standard Pixel doesn't have. I don't know. When it comes to the front-facing camera, though, you've got a pretty standard 10-megapixel front-facing camera. That's fine. Same sort of deal on the inner camera. Rather than being an under-display camera like the Z Fold 6, you've got it in the corner right there, which I actually prefer. I don't like the under-screen camera in the Z Fold 6. It's 10 megapixels like the front-facing camera. But then we get to the back cameras, which are the ones that kind of disappoint me the most. You've got a pretty standard 48-megapixel main camera that shoots 4K, not 8K like the Pixel 9 Pro XL. It also has 2 megapixels less than the standard Pixel 9 Pro, which has 50 megapixels, so overall the main camera is a little bit worse. Unfortunately, the two other cameras in the back of this phone are also pretty large downgrades from the standard Pixel 9 Pro. The first is the wide-angle lens, or the ultra-wide lens. That's been bumped down from 48 megapixels to 10.5 megapixels. Why? I don't know. As a vlogger, I use that camera the most because it's a wide-angle and it's much easier to frame myself when I can't see myself. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the other camera is the telephoto lens, which again has been bumped down from 48 megapixels to 10.8 megapixels. Again, why? I know I'm giving Google a lot of crap for this, and this is something that Samsung also does, but this phone has such a unique form factor that would be so great for vlogging because you could film yourself with the viewfinder, and it would be such a great vlogging camera. Why don't you give us better cameras? So this is what the video and sound looks like and sounds like on the Google Pixel Pro Max Fold. Pro Max Fold, I said the wrong thing. Well, you guys know what I'm getting at. Continuing on with the cameras, I did do a lot of camera testing with this phone. I did photo testing and video testing, so I'll pop those up on screen. I compared it to my standard vlogging phone, which is my iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I will be upgrading when the 16 Pro Max comes out. But I compared it to that phone just to show you what I usually vlog with and what this phone is capable of. And I will be honest, this phone's photos and videos looked good. The ultra-wide looked fine. The telephoto looked fine. It just wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't as good as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So if you're buying a phone as a creator and you want to create media on your phone, whether it's vlogging or TikToking or whatever you want to do, I wouldn't suggest grabbing a foldable phone because the cameras are never a priority on foldable phones. Even though, if you're a TikToker, imagine how easy it would be to set your phone up like this and film yourself dancing. You've got a little stand, a built-in kickstand. I just don't get it. That said, for people who aren't content creators or are not trying to print out your photos, the video and photo quality is still great. The color accuracy looks good. It's still a good camera. It's just frustrating when you compare it to other pro phones in the same brand's lineup, and it's the most expensive phone that they make. That's all I'm saying. Cameras are good, they work, they get the job done, video quality looks good, the camera quality looks good. I mean, check out these photos, they look great. Imagine using CapCut or some video editing software on this versus a standard phone. That would be so much better. Even though the cameras themselves are not as pro as the Pixel 9 Pro, you do still get some pro features. There's a lot of edits and settings and things that you can do in the software to make your photos and videos look better. You're just not gonna get, the best cameras in this phone. The cameras themselves are just not as pro as their other pro phone. But now let's talk about battery life, because having your phone die in the middle of the day is the worst. And what's interesting about the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold is that because this phone is thinner than last year's version, it actually has a smaller battery than last year's version. However, because the Google Tensor G4 processor is more efficient than last year's version, it lasts longer. In fact, I found this phone lasted longer than Samsung's offering the Z Fold 6, and I was able to get like a full day's usage out of it. Now, to quantify that in hours, my guess would be 8 to 10, depending on your use case. I just use this phone as a regular consumer every day. I didn't really record the amount of time. I really should start doing that. Record how long it takes for the battery to die on these phones. That seems like such a basic thing I should do. I'm sorry, I'll start doing that. I'm new at this. I review sneakers. That's my main gig. You don't have to test battery life on sneakers. Also, check out my main channel if you haven't, linked in the top of the description below. I'm new at tech reviewing. One thing I will say though is that Google does claim that this phone has 24 hours worth of battery life. I did not find that being the case, even on standby. But maybe I wasn't giving this phone the optimal conditions that it needed to get 24 hours of battery life. I don't know. Of course, this phone does feature wireless charging and fast charging. You need a 45-watt charger to get the fast charging, so it charges relatively fast when you do that. The wireless charging is fine. It's fast enough. And unlike some other Android phones, you can't put another phone on top of this and wirelessly charge that phone. It just doesn't include that feature, which is unfortunate. Of course, like other modern smartphones, this phone features Face Unlock, which is actually incredibly fast, both on the outer screen and on the inner screen. You've also got a fingerprint sensor, which is also very fast. And generally, I'd say that this phone, from day-to-day use, whether you're scrolling social media, checking the news, or doing whatever you do on your phone, is all around excellent. I know it seems like I've been giving this phone some unnecessary crap, but I will say that's only because this phone is so expensive. If this was a much cheaper phone, all these problems that I have with it wouldn't really be problems. It's just that price. I guess before I round things off, I should talk about some of the AI features that this phone has. It has all the AI features that you have on the other Google Pixel 9 Pro. You've got Gemini, if you want to pay for that after the first year. which actually is pretty cool. You can check it out in my unboxing video. It's got Add Me, which is a new feature from Google, which allows you to add yourself into photos, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of really interesting AI features that they've added into this phone that apparently the Google Tensor G4 processor is specifically made for, but none of them seem like things that would really change my life or that I'd use on a daily basis. The closest thing is Circle to Search, which is not new for this phone. I guess there is that screenshot search feature, which is nice. If you're looking for a specific screenshot, you can type in exactly what you're looking for and it'll pull it up for you, which is pretty wild. But nothing that's game-changing, and definitely nothing that's different from the standard Google Pixel 9 Pro. And of course, if you want to check out my full review of that phone, I go much more in depth on the AI features. Make sure to click the link at the top of the screen. Also, if you want to grab this phone or that phone, I've made sure to link them through the YouTube shopping tab on your screen. Bunch of things you should check out. Click all the different links, but there you go. Finally, because this phone launched earlier than it usually does, this phone came with Android 14, which currently is still the latest Android. However, in the next month or two, we're going to get Android 15, and usually the new Pixel phones feature the latest Android and they get it first. However, in 2024, it seems like Google was trying to beat Apple to the punch with their new phone release, and because of that, they dropped these phones early and they got the, I guess, soon-to-be older version of Android. Obviously, you'll get a free upgrade to Android 15, and this phone apparently also features 7 years of security feature updates and Android updates, which is pretty nice. I've never kept a phone for 7 years. My dad has, and that was the Motorola Razr V3 from 2005, I think. He had that for more than 7 years, actually. But nowadays, when it comes to smartphones like this, would this phone even last 7 years? I guess it depends on your use case. I don't know. If you're throwing this phone around, probably not. But who knows? But I guess it is nice to know that you do have 7 years of updates if you decide to keep this phone for that long. But hey, that pretty much wraps up my review of the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold. Let me know in the comment section down below if you like this phone, if you're interested in this phone, and whether you picked this phone over the Samsung Z Fold 6. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I've got a bunch of reviews of the new Apple products coming out in the next couple weeks if you guys are interested in that at all. And of course, any of the new Android phones or cool tech coming out in the next couple months. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.